I could have turned back, ignored the faint, rhythmic sound from upstairs, and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. But I didn't. Because in that single, heart-stopping moment when the truth revealed itself before my very eyes, I knew down to my bones that nothing in my carefully constructed life would ever be the same again. And yes, if we are being painfully honest here, I was the one at fault, because in some ways I had been the one who started it all with years of silent acceptance, and undeniably, I was also the one who didn't stop it. Welcome to Stoic Love, where we explore the silent, enduring, and often complicated bonds that tie us together. Today we have a true story, a bitter confession about a betrayal that took place under one roof. It's a story about blurred lines, a silence that turned poisonous, and emotions that grew far beyond anyone's control. My husband, Arthur, was at work. The house was quiet, as it so often was. Arthur is a good man. At least, that's what everyone in our pristine suburban neighborhood believes, and to be fair, in many ways, they aren't wrong. He provides for us financially, his name synonymous with success at his law firm. He is a husband who wears the image of reliability like a perfectly tailored, polished suit. But beneath that polished exterior, behind the closed doors of our immaculate home, lived a different kind of silence, a heavy, suffocating one. You see, Arthur and I had drifted apart in ways that aren't always visible to the outside world. Have you ever felt that kind of distance in a relationship? A quiet chasm that grows wider each day? Let us know in the comments. You are not alone. Ours was the kind of distance that doesn't announce itself with shouting or slammed doors, but with absence. It lived in the quiet dinners where the clinking of forks against plates was the only conversation. It thrived on birthdays remembered by expensive, impersonal gifts, but forgotten in spirit. It owned the long nights spent on opposite ends of a king-sized bed, our backs turned as if oceans separated us instead of mere inches, and that loneliness, that invisible chasm between us, was the fertile ground where this story truly begins. It was a Tuesday afternoon when it happened, a day like any other, filled with the mundane rhythm of household chores. I was dusting the large bookshelf in the living room, a piece of dark mahogany that Arthur had been so proud of. I ran the cloth over framed photos, our wedding day, me looking hopeful and him looking triumphant. A photo of his son, Leo, on my shoulders when he was just 6, both of us laughing with genuine joy. That's when I heard it. A faint noise from upstairs, nothing alarming, just a rhythmic, muffled, and steady sound. At first, I didn't think much of it. The house had its own language of groans and creaks. But something about this particular sound pulled at me, like a single thread unraveling from a perfectly woven sweater. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was probably just the washing machine in its final spin cycle, or a tree branch brushing against the siding. I should just finish my chores, prepare for Arthur's late arrival, and move on. But my curiosity had already been stirred, and in a life where every day felt like a quiet, gray repeat of the one before, curiosity felt almost dangerous, almost alive. So against my better judgment, I set the dustcloth down and climbed the carpeted stairs. As I ascended, the air itself seemed to change. It felt heavier, thicker, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. When I reached the landing, I paused, my hand resting on the banister. The sound grew clearer now, no longer just a faint, ambiguous noise, but something deliberate, something human. My first instinct, a powerful surge of self-preservation, was to turn back, to descend the stairs, return to my dusting, and pretend I hadn't heard anything at all. But something inside me, a force I couldn't name. Maybe it was the years of loneliness, or maybe just a desperate need for something, anything, to break the monotony, kept my feet moving forward. I stopped just outside the door to the guest room. We used to call it the extra space, a room for visitors who rarely came, but it wasn't extra anymore. For the past year, since he'd been home from his disastrous first year at college, it had become Leo's room. It was a space claimed by the quiet, brooding young man who shared our home, but not our name. The door was slightly ajar. A narrow strip of light spilled into the darkened hallway, thin and sharp like a blade. My hand hovered over the wooden frame, caught in a moment of indecision, torn between knocking politely and quietly slipping away, respecting his privacy. But before I could choose, I caught sight of something through the crack, something that made my stomach lurch and my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't the sound anymore that held me captive. It was what I saw, a glow, a reflection from a screen, and then a flash of moving images. Images and words that weren't meant for me. Images that were raw, intimate, and unmistakably private. My heart, which had been beating normally moments before, slammed against my ribs with a painful, violent force. The blood drained from my face, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I had uncovered something I wasn't supposed to see. I had stumbled upon a secret, a private moment that felt like a violation to witness. And in that instant, with the muffled sounds from the screen echoing in the silent hall, I knew nothing in this house, nothing in my fragile marriage, and certainly nothing in my relationship with my stepson, would ever feel the same again. He noticed me. His head, which had been bent down, snapped up, his eyes widening in absolute horror as they met mine through the crack in the door. For a fraction of a second, the silence was a physical weight pressing down on both of us, a shared moment of pure, unadulterated shock. I should have said something. I should have gasped and spun around, pretending I'd seen nothing. I should have laughed it off, made a joke about knocking, or just closed the door and left, allowing him the dignity of his privacy, however compromised. But my body betrayed me. I froze, my hand still hovering by the doorframe, my eyes locked on his. His face flushed a deep, painful crimson, a chaotic mixture of anger, profound shame, and palpable fear. He fumbled with the laptop on his bed, his movements clumsy and panicked as he tried to slam it shut, to hide what he had been doing, to cover the evidence of his private world. But the damage was already done. The images were seared into my mind. When our eyes met again, it was like colliding head-on with a storm. The raw guilt in his eyes mirrored the stunned confusion in mine. And yet, beneath all of that, there was something else, something unspoken, something dangerous that passed between us in that loaded silence. It was a shared secret, a moment of vulnerability that now bound us together in a way we had never been before. We didn't speak. Not at first. How could we? What could possibly be said? I finally managed to break my paralysis, muttering something clumsy and half-formed, an apology that didn't sound like an apology. I'm sorry. I was just... My voice shook, my throat as dry as if I had swallowed a handful of sand. He tried to answer, to form an excuse, but his words tangled and died on his lips. All that came out was a fractured, stammering attempt at covering the uncoverable. It's not. I was just research. The silence that followed wasn't ordinary silence. It wasn't peaceful or comfortable. It was charged, thick, suffocating. It was the silence of a shared trauma, a moment that could never be taken back. When I finally stepped back into the hallway, pressing my palm against the cool, painted wall to steady myself, my body trembled from head to toe. My mind spun in 100 different directions at once. What had I just done? Why hadn't I walked away sooner? And why, deep down in a place I was afraid to examine, was I so certain that what had just happened was not just an accident, but the beginning of something neither of us could possibly control? It's a heavy burden, carrying a secret that isn't yours. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where silence felt louder than words, your subscription to Stoic Love helps us explore more stories that delve into these complex human moments. That evening, we sat across from each other at the formal dining table. Arthur's absence was a familiar void, a ghost at the head of the table. He was working late again, a text message sent at 6 p.m. His only communication buried in his endless reports and numbers that always seemed more important than the people in his home. The clinking of silverware against porcelain was the only sound between Leo and me. Every scrape of a knife, every clatter of a fork, echoed like a scream in the quiet dining room. I kept my eyes fixed on my plate of chicken and roasted vegetables, but I could feel his gaze on me. It wasn't constant, but it flickered, darting up from his own plate like he was testing the air, trying to read my expression, trying to see if I was going to be the one to speak first. Neither of us did. We ate in a silence that was heavier than any I had ever shared with his father. This wasn't the silence of strangers with nothing to say. It was the silence of two people carrying a secret so heavy, so awkward, it felt like it had a physical weight. And in that silence, something new and irreversible was already taking root between us. A strange, unnerving intimacy born from a shared moment of profound shame. After dinner, I was in the kitchen, washing the dishes by hand, when he came in. He stood by the counter, not saying anything, just watching me. The simple domestic act of washing dishes suddenly felt performative, my movements stiff and unnatural under his scrutiny. "Do you need help?" he finally asked, his voice low, almost timid. "No, I've got it," I replied, my back still to him. "You should probably get back to your studies." I heard him take a step closer. "I'm sorry," he said, the words so quiet I almost missed them. "About, earlier." I stopped scrubbing, my hands submerged in the warm, soapy water. I squeezed my eyes shut. "We don't have to talk about it, Leo." "I think maybe we do," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence. "I don't want things to be weird between us." "Aren't they already?" I countered, finally turning around to face him. He looked so young, so vulnerable, his face still holding a trace of that afternoon's shame. He just shook his head, looking down at his feet. "I don't know, you're the only person I can actually talk to in this house." His words were a gut punch. They were a confession of his own loneliness, a mirror of my own. They were also, in that moment, incredibly dangerous. They were a bridge across the awkward chasm of the afternoon, an invitation to a new kind of closeness I wasn't sure I could handle. I dried my hands and leaned against the counter, creating a small but necessary space between us. "Your father. He's just busy, Leo. He loves you." The words sounded hollow even to my own ears. "He loves his job," Leo corrected, a bitter edge to his voice. "He provides. That's his definition of love. It's not the same." He was right, of course. Arthur's love was a distant, theoretical concept, like a star you can see, but never feel its warmth. My love, my care for Leo, was the sun that had warmed this house for years. It was a protective, nurturing love, a kind of stoic love that endured, that showed up every day. But after what I had seen, I felt a tremor of fear. What happens when that reliable warmth is perceived as something else? "I know it's hard," I said softly, "but we'll get through it. We always do." He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine. "Will we? Will we get through this?" That was the question, wasn't it? And looking at the earnest, confused young man standing before me, a man I had raised as my own, I honestly didn't have an answer. This was our story, a testament to how even the most stable relationships can be thrown into chaos by a single, unguarded moment. If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might understand the complexities of family secrets. Your support helps us tell more stories like this, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to Stoic Love for more.